Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show dedicated to making you instantly fluent in the most critical topics shaping our world. Today, we are focusing on one man who has, well, to put it mildly, fundamentally reshaped the trajectory of nearly a fifth of the world's population. Xi Jinping.
Indeed. And you have to remember, when Xi Jinping took the reins as general secretary back in 2012, China was operating under a very different system.
A carefully balanced system, right, the collective leadership model.
Exactly. That was Deng Xiaoping's legacy, and it was designed very specifically to prevent the catastrophic cult of personality we saw under Mao Zedong a decade later.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that system has been completely swept aside.
Absolutely. The speed of it, the scale,
Yeah.
it's just breathtaking. She has centralized authority to a degree we haven't witnessed since the mid-20th century.
Culminating, of course, in him securing that unprecedented third term in 2022.
And that is the core of our mission today. We are diving deep into a comprehensive stack of sources covering his entire career, his guiding ideology, what we now know as Xi Jinping Thought, and of course his key policies and the profound systemic changes he's enacted.
Our deep dive today is really a forensic examination of that journey. I mean, how did a man who was once an exiled pariah, someone who was personally persecuted during the Cultural Revolution, how did he manage to ascend to become the ultimate paramount leader of China's fifth generation of leadership?
And crucially, what does his signature political project, the Chinese Dream, truly signify? Not just for China's domestic political landscape, but, for the entire global order. I think to understand any of that, we have to start at the beginning. We have to understand the crucible that forged this specific type of leader.
Okay, let's unpack this journey, and that means starting with his roots. Xi Jinping was born in 1953, which puts him squarely within the princeling cohort.
The children of the revolutionary elite. Exactly. His father, Xi Jinping, was a highly decorated Communist Party veteran. He'd been a former vice premier. I mean, this is a political pedigree that should have guaranteed a life of privilege, a clear path to power.
But that guarantee just evaporated. And it happened very early on, which I think is key. It demonstrates the inherent volatility of CCP politics.
So he's just 10 years old.
Barely 10. It's 1963, and his father is abruptly purged from the party. He's removed from all his posts, sent to work in a factory in Henan. And this wasn't just a political demotion. This was the start of a decade of intense personal trauma for the entire family.
That is the pivotal moment, isn't it? Our sources describe this absolute chaos that just engulfs the Xi family as the Cultural Revolution gathers pace.
I mean, you have student militants ransacking their home. The political persecution was so intense that it led to an unimaginable tragedy.
The suicide of his half-sister.
At her military academy, yes. And Xi himself was only 15 when his father was later imprisoned in 1968. That period. It wasn't just political education. For him, it was survival training.
You can see how that would hammer home a lesson that defines his entire career.
Absolutely. That political control is fragile, that political loyalty is everything, and that the party, if it's not disciplined, can just devour its own children.
So in 1969, at age 15, Xi himself gets swept up in the down to the countryside movement.
And he's exiled, sent to the remote, impoverished Liangjiahe village in Shaanxi province.
And he wasn't just visiting. He lived there for 7 full years. We often hear this anecdote that he lived in a yaodong, a traditional cave house.
Right, but you have to understand, this isn't some abstract hardship. This is grinding, physical poverty.
It was brutal.
So brutal, in fact, that the sources reveal he actually tried to desert at one point. He fled back to Beijing.
But he was caught.
He was arrested during a crackdown on deserters and sent to a work camp to dig ditches before being forced to go back to the village. The fact that he was willing to risk arrest just to escape, I mean, that speaks volumes about the sheer desperation and the physical toll of those 7 years.
Which makes his next move all the more remarkable. He tries to join the very party that had persecuted his family and exiled him.
It's incredible. And because of his father's continuing political stain, he submitted, 10 unsuccessful applications to the CCP.
10. That's not a casual rejection?
No, it's reputed institutional denial.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1974 that his application was finally approved, and only because the local village secretaries, who'd seen his capabilities and determination firsthand, vouched for him. They took a huge political risk to do that.
It just shows an unparalleled level of political persistence.
It really does. So he finally gets in, and soon after, education follows. From 1975 to 1979, he studies chemical engineering at Tsinghua University.
But under that worker, peasant, soldier, student system.
Right. So he earned his spot through political diligence and manual labor, not just academic merit.
His career then shifts from the rural periphery back toward the political center for a little while anyway.
Yes, very briefly. He served Zhenbiao, a Politburo member and Minister of Defense in Beijing. But he soon made a really strategic move to local government. And this shift, starting his ascent through the local ranks and moving along China's fast-developed coast, was absolutely critical. It gave him deep administrative and economic experience, far from the factional infighting that was still plaguing the capital.
Let's look at those early posts. Hebei, specifically Zhengding County, from 82 to 85. There's a great anecdote here that really foreshadows his future approach to governance. It's very hands-on.
Right, the story of the excessive requisitions. The central government was taking too much grain, and it was crushing the local farmers.
And Xi and another official, they didn't just complain locally?
No, they wrote a letter directly to the central government, and that intervention worked. It convinced Beijing to reduce the annual requisition amount by a massive 14 million kilograms of grain.
That's huge. The impact must have been immediate.
It was. Farmers' average incomes in that county shot up from 148 yuan to over 400 yuan in just 1 year. It shows you he prioritized tangible results for the masses over just towing the provincial line.
And he wasn't just focused on agriculture. He showed an early focus on tourism, on using local resources.
That's right. He was instrumental in building the Rongguo Mansion, which secured the filming base for the highly influential television series Dream of the Red Mansions.
Which was a massive show at the time.
A cultural phenomenon. And that single project generated over 17 million yuan in revenue that year. So he learned early that cultural projects, if you manage them properly, could be powerful economic engines.
Okay, so moving along the coast, his next major stop is Fujian. He spends nearly 2 decades there, from 1985 to 2002, eventually becoming governor.
And this was his deep dive into modernization and market opening. Fujian was geographically crucial, so right across the Taiwan Strait.
So his key objective was attracting investment.
Taiwanese and foreign investment, yes, establishing major manufacturing firms. But he also spearheaded these ambitious local initiatives like the Digital Fujian program to modernize the region's IT infrastructure and the Fuzhou 3820 Project Master Plan.
A long-term strategy.
A very forward-looking strategy that mapped out Fuzhou's development goals over 3, 8, and 20-year horizons. So he was consistently focused on long-term strategic development and often stepping in to stabilize areas that were rocked by corruption scandals.
Which brings us to Xinjiang, from 2002 to 2007. This is the tenure that really put him on the map nationally, where he rose to provincial party secretary.
And he didn't just oversee immense economic growth. I think it was averaging 14% per year. He was also developing his management philosophy.
The double eight strategy.
Exactly. And this wasn't just jargon. It was a comprehensive playbook. It identified 8 comparative advantages Xinjiang had, like its location or its human resources, and paired them with 8 corresponding actions the government had to take.
Like further marketizing, improving infrastructure.
Protecting the environment, all of it. It was this holistic, structured, and strategic approach that was exactly what the central leadership in Beijing wanted to see.
And his simultaneous commitment to cleaning house really cemented his reputation. He took a famously tough and straightforward stance against corrupt officials.
Yes. So this reputation for capability, discipline, and uncompromising anti-corruption while delivering massive growth, it set the stage. In 2007, he was rapidly transferred to Shanghai, filling the vacuum left by the colossal corruption dismissal of Chen Liangjiahe.
It was a very short tenure, though.
Only 7 months. It was primarily designed to prove he was a safe, dependable pair of hands, ready for the highest level.
And sources point to the small but memorable detail from that Shanghai stint that just speaks volumes about his rigid adherence to protocol.
He famously refused to use a special train reserved for national leaders that the Shanghai administrators had arranged for him. He cited party regulation. So he finished that coastal trajectory having established a reputation as controversy-free, disciplined, and very capable of managing complex, market-driven economies.
So having proved himself in the provinces, the next logical step was Beijing and the center of power. At the 17th Party Congress in October 2007, he joins the Politburo Standing Committee, the ultimate decision-making body. And the signal that came with his appointment was fascinating.
The signal was unmistakable. He was ranked above Li Keqiang, who was also entering the PSC, and that positioning explicitly designated Xi as Hu Jintao's presumed successor. Deng Xiaoping's model of orderly succession was being followed, ensuring stability at the top.
So between 2008 and 2013, he quickly accumulates this crucial experience, holding significant national portfolios.
Vice President, Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, the CMC, which gave him a crucial foothold in the military. And he was leading these massive organizational efforts, including the preparations for the 2008 Beijing Olympics.
He was also tasked with chairing that high-level committee known as the 6521 Project.
Yes, which was established to ensure stability during some very politically sensitive anniversaries in 2009. These roles, they exposed him to every aspect of national security, foreign policy, and internal governance required of a future leader.
Now, despite this clear signaling, his path wasn't entirely uncontested. We have to talk about Bo Xilai, the dynamic party secretary of Chongqing, who was seen by many as a powerful rival, a potential alternative.
Bo Xilai was a legitimate threat. He had both the princeling pedigree and this charismatic political appeal. He was running a very populist model in Chongqing that resonated with some of the party's left-leaning factions.
And she even initially praised his policies.
He did, during a 2010 visit, which really shows you the political sensitivity of the time.
But the internal dynamics shifted, and shifted dramatically.
They certainly did. Bo's downfall, triggered by the Wang Lijun incident, where his police chief tried to defect to the U.S. consulate, revealing a murder cover-up involving Bo's wife, it was high drama.
Absolutely.
And that event, coupled with the corruption charges that followed, essentially cleared the field for Xi. His accession became virtually undisputed, and it demonstrated to everyone that even the most powerful local figures could be brought down by the center.
As vice president, Xi traveled a lot, establishing his international profile.
He visited North Korea, the Middle East, Latin America, Europe. His 2012 visit to the U.S. was particularly notable.
Right, with that sentimental stop in Iowa to meet the family who hosted him way back in 1985.
Those moments offered a brief glimpse of a softer side, but a more telling indicator of his future style came earlier in 2009 during a visit to Mexico. He made a very pointed statement about China's critics.
The bored foreigners comment.
Yes, saying, "There are some bored foreigners with full stomachs who have nothing better to do than point fingers at us."
That's a strong phrase.
It is. And he added that China doesn't export revolution or hunger or poverty or headaches. That comment, delivered while he was still vice president, was an early, uncensored indicator of the assertive nationalism and the don't meddle in our affairs attitude that would come to define his time in power.
And that strong, unapologetic voice became the foundation of his first major initiative after officially being elected General Secretary in November 2012, the anti-corruption campaign.
He immediately stressed that fighting corruption was absolutely critical for the CCP's very survival.
This wasn't just rhetoric for him, was it?
No, it was existential. His own history, seeing his family destroyed by political instability, made him viscerally afraid of the decay of the party. He argued corruption was the toughest challenge the party faced, and within weeks, in December 2012, he outlined the 8-point regulation.
Which were strict, practical rules.
Very practical, curbing things like lavish banquets, excessive motorcades, waste in official party business.
And the campaign became famously known for rooting out tigers and flies. It's such an effective, memorable metaphor.
It's brilliant political branding. Tigers were the high-ranking incumbent and retired officials, the untouchables.
Figures like Zhu Yongkang, Zhu Kaihu.
Exactly. Former Politburo Standing Committee members, former CMC vice chairman, and the flies were the ordinary party functionaries. It ensured no level of government was safe.
The scale is just staggering, far beyond any previous anti-corruption drive.
I mean, consider the numbers. Over 200,000 officials received warnings, fines, or demotions within the first 2 years alone. By 2023, approximately 2.3 million government officials had been formally prosecuted or disciplined. This wasn't merely a cleanup. This was a political purge wrapped in a campaign of moral renewal.
That does raise an important question. We know the campaign neutralized rivals like Zhu Yongkang, but was it actually good for governance? Did it improve things, or did the paralysis and fear of action end up being a worse outcome in the long run?
That is the essential analytical tension, isn't it? The sources suggest that while public opinion, at least initially, was strongly supportive, they loved the crackdown on conspicuous consumption, the long-term effect was twofold.
Okay.
On one hand, yes, genuine graft was reduced in some areas. But on the other, the pervasive fear of being targeted led to widespread bureaucratic paralysis.
So officials were afraid to make any decisions.
Exactly. Cadres became reluctant to make bold moves, preferring to do nothing rather than risk crossing some unwritten line and being investigated by the CCDI. It prioritized political loyalty and inaction over innovation and bold governance.
And this campaign became the tool for institutionalizing his control.
Precisely. Xi used the campaign to reform and dramatically empower the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, CCDI, making it this powerful, independent control body that reported directly to him.
And then in 2018, that net was expanded.
Right, with the creation of the National Supervision Commission. This effectively granted the CCDI oversight not just over party members, but over all state officials and public servants. It formalized political control over the entire bureaucracy.
And this reach extended deep into the military, which is absolutely critical for consolidating ultimate power.
Without absolute control of the gun, the leader is vulnerable. Specific anti-corruption efforts targeted high-ranking military officials, including former defense ministers Li Shangfu and Wei Fenghe. Sources suggest that by 2025, at least 14 generals appointed under Xi's direct leadership have been officially ousted. This anti-corruption campaign was the essential mechanism for ensuring absolute, unquestioning loyalty across the entire political, bureaucratic, and military apparatus.
So the anti-corruption drive wasn't really the goal in itself, it was the means to the goal.
The ultimate centralization of power.
Exactly. Political observers are unanimous on this. Xi Jinping is the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, and this is where the structural changes to the party itself really take center stage.
It's a definitive break from the Deng Xiaoping era. Deng's model insisted on collective leadership to prevent another Maoist disaster. Xi has systematically dismantled that. He centralized institutional power, and at the same time, he targeted rival factions.
Which included systematically eroding the power of the Tuanpai, the Communist Youth League faction.
Exactly. The Tuanpai historically acted as a feeder system for future leaders, but Xi famously criticized their cadres. He said they were too bureaucratic, too predictable, too stereotypical in their talk.
He was suggesting they lacked the real-world grit he developed during his youth.
Pretty much. He essentially shut down that alternative path to leadership, ensuring that the only way up was through loyalty to the center.
And the ultimate expression of this centralization, the structural change that sent shockwaves around the world, came in 2018.
The constitutional shift.
Yeah?
The National People's Congress passed constitutional amendments that formally removed term limits for the president and vice president.
This wasn't just symbolic, was it?
Not at all. It was the institutional removal of the guardrails that Deng had put in place. It legally paved the way for Xi to secure his third term in March 2023, and conceptually, it removed any formal restriction on him remaining in power indefinitely.
And alongside this legal change came the accumulation of all these titles, this reverent language designed to elevate him above his peers.
This is classical cult of personality engineering. You're building a political scaffolding around the man. In 2016, he officially received the title of Leadership Corps from the CCP.
A term used by Deng Xiaoping, but it's relatively bureaucratic.
It is. What's fascinating is the political upgrade that followed.
The introduction of the term Liangjiahe.
Yes, Liangjiahe. It's a reverent term for leader that carries immense historical weight. It was previously reserved only for Mao Zedong and briefly for his immediate successor, Huo Guofeng. By introducing this term and later naming him the people's leader in 2019, he was deliberately signaling a status beyond just first among equals. He's now viewed as the pilot at the helm, placing him outside the normal bureaucratic competition.
And this entire ideological project culminated in 2021 with the adoption of the third major historical resolution in party history.
Only Mao in 1945 and Deng in 1981 had adopted previous ones. So this was a huge deal.
What did it do?
The historical resolution, adopted at the 6th plenum, fundamentally secured Xi's place in the pantheon of Chinese history. It elevated his status to be similar to Mao and Deng, and it justified the end of the collective leadership era. It promoted the crucial slogans of the two establishes and the two upholds.
The two establishes being establishing Xi's core status and his thought as the guiding principle.
Right. And the two upholds being upholding Xi's core status and the party central's authority. These terms mandated that the entire party must now unite around and protect his central position. It made dissent ideologically, not just politically, unacceptable.
Okay, let's talk about the philosophical engine behind all this. Xi Jinping Thought. It's everywhere now, incorporated into both the party and state constitutions. What is the deep meaning of this dense doctrine beyond the very long official title?
The official title is Xi Jinping Thought on Socialism with Chinese Characteristics for a New Era. Strategically, it's positioned as the 21st century evolution of Marxism, Party academics actually describe it as 21st century Marxism.
So it's the ideological capstone that connects the original dogma of Marx and Lenin to the current realities of modern China.
Exactly. And it surpasses Deng's focus on just economic pragmatism.
And the political purpose isn't just theoretical, it's about internal discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Xi uses these chemical analogies to explain its operational function. He has famously stated that communism is the calcium in a party member's spine.
Right.
And he argues that without this ideological strength, members would suffer the osteoporosis of political decay, the very kind of decay he saw internally that led to the chaos of his youth and the ultimate collapse of the Soviet Union.
Which brings us to the practical implementation. This is enforced compliance, often through technology.
Yes, the Wexiqiango app, which translates to Study to Make China Strong, is promoted and in many cases mandatory for cadres to immerse themselves in the doctrine daily.
And it tracks them.
It uses gamification, quizzes, and tracking to ensure ideological conformity permeates the entire bureaucracy. Loyalty is now a measurable KPI for your career progression.
His signature political slogan, the Chinese Dream, is perhaps the most marketable piece of his ideology.
If we are deep diving here, what's the complex definition of that slogan?
The Chinese Dream is deliberately broad and highly potent. It's fundamentally linked to the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. It's not about the individual pursuit of happiness like in the American context. It's a collective national aspiration.
So what's it about?
The sources define it as being about Chinese prosperity, collective effort, socialism, and, most importantly, achieving national glory, a China that is once again recognized as the dominant great power on the global stage. It is about returning China to its rightful historical status.
And in terms of governance, what defines his personal style? It sounds like a blend of extreme secrecy and relentless control.
That tension is key. He maintains a preference for secrecy. He rarely gives press conferences, and his major speeches are often released months or even years after he delivers them.
Which allows the party to control the narrative completely.
Mhm.
But you contrast that with his approach to management, which is micromanagement. Sources report he personally reviews every single draft of major policy documents and often returns all submitted reports with his instructions the very next morning. This is intense personal control over the entire policy apparatus. It prevents any local improvisation or delay.
And that personal, intense control extends to an unprecedented level of censorship and surveillance across civil life.
Correct. Since he came to power, censorship has become stricter across the board. Xi's message to the media is uncompromising. Media must hold the family name of the party.
Meaning it must embody the party's will and safeguard its authority, not operate as some independent entity seeking truth.
Exactly. Digitally, this is formalized in the concept of internet sovereignty,
Which is the state's absolute right to control internet usage within its borders.
which has led to the continued blocking of major foreign platforms like Google, Facebook, Wikipedia. His administration has enforced a strict internet real name system and deployed these massive cleanup campaigns like Cleaning the Web and Operation King Lang, constantly purging anything deemed politically questionable or disruptive to social harmony.
And how is this control applied at the most granular level of Chinese society?
It's supported by a significant expansion of the national security legal framework, the counterespionage law, the cybersecurity law, the data security law, and the dramatic growth of the mass surveillance network. Crucially, we see the rise and prominence of the grid-style social management system.
What's that?
It involves subdividing China's counties and cities into small, manageable zones grids, with personnel in each zone regularly reporting all activity and identifying risks to the local government. It's an institutionalized system of ubiquitous, neighborhood-level security and control.
This centralization wasn't just ideological. It demanded a complete structural overhaul of the state itself to ensure the party was truly in command of every single lever of power.
Right. Xi's tenure has seen these massive institutional reforms, particularly in 2018 and 2023, all aimed at integrating the CCP and state bodies more closely than ever before.
This is vital, isn't it? The strategic move was to assert ultimate party control by bypassing existing institutions.
Yes. Traditionally, the State Council, led by the Premier, handled much of the day-to-day governance and economic policy. She achieved this by creating these powerful, supraministerial steering committees, initially called Central Leading Groups.
Like the leading group for cybersecurity and informatization.
and the one for financial economic affairs. And because Xi chaired these leading groups, he was essentially making policy above and outside the traditional government mechanism.
So they were upgraded to powerful commissions in 2018.
Right, which reinforced the CCP's direct policy-making control and simultaneously diminished the traditional power base of the premier, who was now seen as merely executing the central party's decisions. It fundamentally shifted the power dynamic away from the State Council and toward the General Secretary's office.
And the most recent reforms in 2023 just doubled down on this consolidation, targeting key strategic sectors like finance and technology.
The 2023 reforms were all about total control over money and data. They established two CCP bodies for finance, the Central Financial Commission, CFC, which oversees all financial regulation, and the revival of the Central Financial Work Commission, which handles party discipline within this sector. They also created the Central Science and Technology Commission to broadly oversee and coordinate the technology sector, making sure that industrial policy directly serves party goals.
They even went so far as to amend the foundational legal structure of the government.
They did. In 2024, the Organic Law of the State Council was amended to add a clause explicitly requiring the cabinet to follow CCP ideology and policies. This isn't just a political directive, it's a legal subordination of the state government to the party's will.
Let's turn to the military, the People's Liberation Army, the PLA. Control of the PLA is clearly paramount to Xi, and he's constantly referencing the fate of the Soviet Union.
That analogy is his constant motivation. He argues the Soviet collapse happened because its military was separated from the party and disarmed. And when the crisis came, nobody was man enough to stand up and resist.
That fear of internal political decay and disloyalty is foundational to his military restructuring.
Absolutely. In 2014, he held the New Gushin Conference to re-emphasize Mao's principle of the party has absolute control over the army.
And that political reassertion was immediately followed by the most extensive structural reforms in decades.
Right.
What was the mechanism of these reforms?
The overarching goal was to shift the PLA from a geographically based structure, which could foster local military fiefdoms, to a joint operational structure reporting directly to the CMC, which of course Xi chairs.
So he abolished the 4 autonomous general departments.
General Staff, General Political, General Logistics, and General Armaments. All gone. Replaced them with 15 smaller agencies reporting directly to the CMC. He also reduced the number of large regional theater commands from 7 down to 5.
So this streamlined command chain meant less power for regional military leaders and more direct authority for him as chairman of the CMC.
Precisely. And concurrently, he dramatically modernized the PLA to focus on modern warfighting. He established the Joint Logistics Support Force and upgraded the old 2nd Artillery Corps, which handled nuclear and conventional missiles, to the PLA Rocket Force.
And the modernization didn't stop there. The 2024 reforms added more branches focused on cutting-edge warfare.
The 2024 overhaul established 3 critical new forces: the Aerospace Force, the Cyberspace Force, and the Information Support Force. The dissolution of the previous Strategic Support Force and the creation of these new entities signals a clear prioritization of integrating space, cyber, and information warfare capabilities directly under centralized party control.
And all this modernization is underpinned by a massive expansion of the military budget.
The official military budget has more than doubled under Xi. It's projected to reach $246 billion in 2025. This has driven rapid expansion, particularly for power projection.
The PLA...
It's been growing faster than any major global naval power. They're commissioning new aircraft carriers, like the Shandong and the Fujian. And this maritime reach culminated in 2017 with the establishment of China's first overseas naval base in Djibouti, giving them a critical logistical foothold in the Horn of Africa.
Before we move on, let's quickly touch on his simultaneous drive for legal reform, which he calls Chinese socialistic rule of law.
This is another one of those deliberate paradoxes. The stated aim was genuinely positive, reforming a judicial system that was plagued by corruption and local government interference. He wanted to improve fairness and commercial certainty. He championed a greater role for the Constitution and called for judicial integrity.
But there's a huge caveat.
The caveat is crucial. This legal system must absolutely uphold the absolute leadership of the party. It is rule by law, not rule of law.
So the law is a tool to serve the party's stability.
And its policy goals. It's not an independent check on party power. The most telling metric is in the legislation itself. The share of laws passed that explicitly affirm the leadership of the CCP has skyrocketed. They did establish some useful specialized courts, like the Hangzhou Internet Court, but the system's foundational principle is political submission.
Okay, moving to the economy. Xi's approach signals a profound ideological redirection. For decades, China operated on this GDP heroism model growth at all costs. Xi abandoned that.
He abandoned it in favor of high-quality development. And this is a major structural shift.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means prioritizing the correction of long-standing structural imbalances, tackling social issues like inequality, emphasizing environmental protection, and focusing on sustainable high-tech growth over just sheer volume. It's a necessary move, really. The old model was leading to ecological disaster and massive public resentment over wealth caps.
A major, very visible achievement of this redirection was the massive push against poverty.
The battle against poverty, which he launched in 2015, was arguably one of the greatest feats of centralized state coordination in modern history. By 2021, declared a complete victory over extreme poverty, citing that nearly 100 million people had been lifted out of it during his tenure.
Though it's worth noting that was using China's own lower poverty threshold.
That's right, not the World Bank standard. But still, the mobilization of state resources to achieve that goal was undeniable and highly successful in boosting the party's domestic legitimacy.
The most dramatic state intervention, though, was in the property sector, the longtime engine of China's economy.
This is where Xi's ideology clashed directly with unchecked market forces. He coined the defining phrase, "Houses are for living, not for speculation." His administration sought to reduce the economy's reliance on the massive debt-fueled real estate sector, which represented almost a quarter of all economic activity.
And this was operationalized through the Three Red Lines policy. How did that mechanism work, and what was the impact?
The Three Red Lines policy was introduced in 2020 and placed strict caps on property developers' ability to borrow based on three financial metrics: their debt-to-asset ratio, their net debt-to-equity ratio, and their cash-to-short-term debt ratio.
So if a developer failed one line, they were penalized.
And if they failed all three, they were essentially cut off from new borrowing.
On the surface, that sounds like responsible financial policy, but it triggered a crisis.
It did, because the entire property sector was so deeply leveraged. The sudden enforcement of these rules was just too much for highly indebted players like Evergrande and Country Garden. The policy successfully reduced financial risk exposure for state banks, but it starved developers of cash, leading directly to mass defaults, stalled construction, and the current massive property crisis.
It really highlights the party's willingness to tolerate severe short-term economic pain for long-term ideological goals.
It does. And parallel to this deleveraging, we see an intense focus on technology and self-reliance, especially after the trade war with the U.S., put China's dependence on foreign semiconductors into such sharp relief.
The mandate now is existential, isn't it? Reduce reliance on foreign technology and achieve technological supremacy.
Exactly. And this is being driven by massive state-directed industrial policy, most notably the Made in China 2025 plan. This plan aims for self-reliance in 10 key strategic technologies, from robotics to new energy vehicles. Consequently, R&D spending in China has just soared. It now surpasses the entire European Union combined.
And the ultimate message to the private sector was sent pretty dramatically in 2020.
That was the high-profile halt of Ant Group's highly anticipated IPO. After the founder, Jack Ma, publicly criticized government finance regulation, Xi personally intervened to halt what would have been the world's largest IPO.
That served as a clear warning to all private entrepreneurs.
The warning was, there is a ceiling on your economic power, and the party, not the market, holds ultimate regulatory authority.
That brings us to the defining economic slogan of the post-2021 era, common prosperity.
Common prosperity is defined as affluence for all, described as an essential requirement of socialism. Ideologically, this is Xi's direct break from Deng's philosophy of let some get rich first. It's the ideological justification for large-scale state intervention and redistribution.
And it was used to justify wide-ranging crackdowns.
Precisely. It justified massive fines on tech giants accused of monopolistic practices, the elimination of the entire private tutoring industry through the double reduction policy.
Which was to reduce educational inequality and cost burdens.
Right, and widespread restrictions on wealth flaunting, including pressure on high salaries and bonuses in the financial sector. The goal is affluence, but without the perceived decay, inequality, and social instability of Western capitalism.
Shifting to foreign policy, we move from economic self-reliance to global assertiveness, something Xi champions as major country diplomacy.
Xi explicitly broke away from Deng's famous advice to hide your strength and bide your time. He advocates for China to take its rightful place as a big power, He champions baseline thinking, these explicit red lines that other nations must not cross, to ensure China's resolve is never misjudged.
And this shift gave rise to the style of Chinese diplomacy known globally as wolf warrior diplomacy.
That is the aggressive, hawkish posture adopted by Chinese diplomats, asserting nationalistic interests often through combative and confrontational language, particularly on social media. Ideologically, this is underpinned by Xi's belief that the East is rising and the West is declining, which was fueled by perceived Western dysfunction, especially during the global pandemic response.
The most visible example of this global reach has to be the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI.
The BRI is enormous, a massive global infrastructure and economic development project spanning Africa, Asia, and Eurasia.
Right.
It's often cited as the largest infrastructure investment by a single great power since the U.S. Marshall Plan.
But the BRI is just the economic foundation. She has also unveiled a suite of new initiatives designed to shape global governance.
Right. We need to differentiate these. We have the GDI, the GSI, and the GCI.
Okay, break them down.
The Global Development Initiative, GDI, focuses on accelerating the UN 2030 agenda, prioritizing infrastructure and poverty reduction. The Global Security Initiative, GSI, is more provocative. It promotes a new path to security that is often seen as a direct challenge to the Western-led NATO and alliance security architecture.
And the GCI?
The Global Civilization Initiative, GCI, focuses on promoting common values of mankind, which are often interpreted as a pushback against Western concepts of universal human rights and democracy. They are all designed to increase China's global influence and offer alternatives to the U.S.-led order.
On specific relationships, the relationship with the U.S. changed dramatically under Xi.
Xi initially called for a new type of great power relations, hoping for a formalized recognition of China's new status. But the ties soured dramatically after 2017.
Driven by the escalating trade war under President Trump.
That, followed by geopolitical tension over technology and human rights, and it further deteriorated during the mutual blame surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. The relationship is now characterized by fierce competition across all domains.
What about Russia? Xi has actively cultivated this relationship, especially after the 2014 Ukraine crisis.
They share a common ideological antipathy towards Western liberalism. During the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian war, Xi provided diplomatic cover, expressing opposition to sanctions against Russia and asserting support for Russia on security issues, while officially maintaining China's stance of respecting territorial integrity. They're increasingly presenting a united, powerful front for the Global South to blunt the effect of international pressure.
And in China's own backyard, in Asia, the assertiveness is perhaps most destabilizing.
Regionally, the PLA Navy's rapid building and militarization of artificial islands in the South China Sea, creating forward operating bases, is perhaps the clearest signal of territorial ambition.
Yeah.
And relations with India have seriously deteriorated due to recurring, sometimes deadly, border standoffs.
In places like Depsang, Doklam, and that lethal clash in 2020.
Exactly. The overarching theme across Asia is assertive regional dominance backed by overwhelming military power.
This intense national security focus and the resulting baseline thinking leads us directly into the massive internal challenges and the highly scrutinized human rights record that defines this era, particularly in Xinjiang. Following terrorist attacks in 2013 and 2014, one happening just after Xi's visit to the region, he launched the Strike Hard campaign against violent terrorism.
And this campaign unleashed systematic mass repression. The mechanism involved the mass detention and surveillance of ethnic minorities, leading to reports of up to 1.8 million people, predominantly Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minorities, being held in internment camps by 2020.
And this was coupled with severe birth suppression campaigns.
Yes, campaigns targeting the Uyghur population aimed at changing the demographic composition of the region.
And crucially, we have internal documentation that speaks to Xi's personal philosophy driving this crackdown.
Yes. Leaked documents reveal that Xi personally ordered officials to show absolutely no mercy and to utilize all the weapons of the people's democratic dictatorship against those deemed infected with the virus of extremism.
He used some chilling language.
He likened extremism to a drug that required painful interventionary treatment. However, in a complex display of pragmatism, he also reportedly warned against outright ethnic discrimination and rejected proposals to eliminate Islam completely.
Suggesting a policy of forced assimilation rather than total eradication?
That distinction, assimilation over eradication, is key to understanding his broader policy toward ethnic minorities.
So his administration has systematically scrapped guarantees for native language education.
And heavily emphasized the teaching of the national language, Mandarin. The goal is to promote a singular sense of identity for the Chinese nation. He further emphasized this by appointing Han Chinese officials to lead the National Ethnic Affairs Commission, signaling a deep institutional commitment to cultural homogenization and integration.
We see a similar tightening of control in Hong Kong, starting with the goal of greater political and economic integration, like the Greater Bay Area Project. But Beijing signaled its true intentions back in 2014.
That's when the State Council published a white paper asserting Beijing's comprehensive jurisdiction over Hong Kong. It effectively declared the previously respected Sino-British Joint Declaration legally subordinate to China's sovereign rule.
The restrictions mounted quickly after that.
Yes, including the National People's Congress Standing Committee restricting voting reforms in 2014, which led directly to massive pro-democracy protests.
And the final nail in the coffin for the one country, two systems model came after the massive protests of 2019.
Following those widespread and disruptive protests, Xi presided over the passage of the 2020 National Security Law, NSL. This law dramatically clamped down on political opposition, freedom of assembly, and freedom of the press in the city. It established the Office for Safeguarding National Security outside Hong Kong's jurisdiction, allowing mainland agents to operate there. This was the rapid and decisive culmination of Xi's long-term project to ensure Hong Kong's full political alignment with the mainland, prioritizing security over promised autonomy.
Moving across the strait to Taiwan, Xi initially used softer rhetoric aimed at economic integration.
He coined that unifying slogan in 2013. Both sides of the Taiwan Strait are one family. This culminated in the historic 2015 meeting with then Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou, the first such meeting between the leaders since 1949. The message was clear. Reunification through peaceful economic means was preferred.
But once the independence-leaning Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, won the presidency under Tsai Ing-wen in 2016, relations quickly deteriorated.
The rhetoric hardened significantly. Xi adopted a much more coercive stance. In a pivotal 2019 speech, he reiterated the goal of unification under the one country, two systems formula, but issued a clear public threat.
Though we make no promise to renounce the use of force line.
Exactly. He said, "We make no promise to renounce the use of force and reserve the option of taking all necessary means." And he emphasized this force would be used against external interference or separatist activities. Since 2018, the PLA has used increasingly frequent and complex military drills around Taiwan as a constant form of political and military pressure.
Finally, we have to discuss his most controversial domestic policy of the last few years, the COVID-19 response. He initially presided over a dynamic zero-COVID policy.
Launched in January 2020, this policy was an extreme example of the party's ability to mobilize and control the population. It involved stringent, prolonged lockdowns, mass testing campaigns, and mandatory centralized quarantine for anyone testing positive, and Xi personally defended it as necessary to protect life safety and to demonstrate the superiority of the Chinese system.
But the cost of this policy, particularly the brutal 2022 Shanghai lockdown, was immense. It caused massive economic disruption and social frustration.
The policy faced mounting internal criticism. When you have a megacity like Shanghai, the engine of the Chinese economy, paralyzed for 2 months, the economic and social toll becomes unbearable. And this discontent tragically spilled over dramatically in November 2022.
Widespread protests broke out across major cities,
Triggered by a fatal apartment fire in Urumqi, where lockdown rules were blamed for hindering rescue efforts.
Does the speed and scale of that reversal show political weakness when faced with popular revolt, or does it show political agility in the face of an impossible policy?
That is the ultimate question about Xi's governance, isn't it? The government responded with a swift and dramatic reversal. By December 2022, they had effectively ended the zero-COVID policy, allowing home quarantine for mild cases and reducing mass testing. It demonstrated that even a highly personalized policy, once it breaches the tolerance level of the populace and threatens economic stability, can be abandoned with astonishing speed. The priority is party survival, even over the signature policy itself. #No and outro.
What a profound and rapid transformation China has undergone in the last decade. Looking back across our deep dive, the scope of change during Xi Jinping's tenure is just monumental. It's a definitive shift from cautious collective leadership to hyper-centralized personal power, all driven by this ideological imperative for absolute control.
We've witnessed the institutionalization of his guiding philosophy, Jinping Thought, which requires absolute ideological conformity enforced by technology and by legal mandate. And this consolidation has enabled a profound redirection of the state, fundamental military reform to ensure absolute loyalty a sharp pivot toward economic self-reliance and common prosperity, and an unwavering tightening of security and surveillance over every single aspect of Chinese society, from finance to farming.
He has truly and fundamentally altered the nation's political landscape, ensuring that the CCP leads government, the military, society, and schools, north, south, east, and west.
The core takeaway, I think, is that Xi Jinping's political identity was forged by the chaos and persecution he experienced firsthand during the Cultural Revolution. He saw the party almost lose control, and he compares China's resilience today against the fall of the depoliticized Soviet military. Having successfully centralized power and eliminated his rivals, he views his primary mandate as absolute control to guarantee the survival of the CCP.
So this leaves us with our final provocative thought for you. Given Xi's traumatic youth and the resulting commitment to maximum centralized control, is this relentless focus on absolute party loyalty the greatest source of China's future strength, providing the necessary stability and coordination to face Western competition? Or is it, ironically, its greatest constraint, stifling the dynamism, the flexibility, and the innovative voices required for long-term growth and global stability? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.